Well, here we are at the end of our series, Rise Up for Freedom. As we've been saying all along, we here at Operation Underground Railroad recognize there are millions of children throughout the world who don't enjoy the simple freedoms that you and I have and may even take for granted. These children are enslaved in a $150 billion human trafficking industry, and we exist to rescue them, to set them free from this hellish slavery so they can enjoy the freedoms that you and I enjoy. Today's stream will be a bit different. We have with us here today 3 o.u.r. operators who were on the ground back in 2014 when the rescue featured in the movie Sound of Freedom took place. And I want to introduce Wiggins and Krista. And yes, I was also there that day. In Sound of Freedom, I even got a 3-second cameo appearance in the movie. I think they're putting me up for an Oscar in Best Supporting Actor in a 3-second role. Just a joke. We're going to be answering some of your questions about what took place today, so please send them in. We've got people here monitoring, and after a few minutes of chatting, we're going to go to your questions. So thank you. We'll be able to talk about what was real in the movie and what may have been embellished just a bit. So Operation Triple Take, each of you had a role in that. So first, maybe a quick introduction, Kristen. I know viewers from a couple episodes ago saw you and heard a little bit about your background, but real quick, your background that brought you to o.u.r. and specifically which part of the Triple Take operation were you involved in?
Yeah, so my background, real quick recap. I am a nurse of 14 years, so I have a medical background, and I got to be a part of Operation Triple Take on what I like to call Poop Island.
Yep, that's right. You give
Poop
it that
Island
name.
is where I got to be for that.
Well, very good. Well, thank you. We'll come back to you to talk about the specifics of that particular operation because, again, that was the main one featured in Sound of Freedom. But Triple Take denotes 3. And so, Wiggins, why don't you talk about your role in the second of the 3 Triple Take operations? And I know you're speaking the truth because I was there with you.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Armenia, Colombia. So quite a distance from Cartagena, quite a distance from the island. So all 3 of those operations all happened at the same time, hence Triple Take. Yeah. And as you know, a lot of people we had to take clear over to Armenia to get that operation done over there. A lot of people on the island. Pretty large undertaking. So we did the undercover stuff. We identified the suspects out there and then ultimately had them arrested.
A coffee growing region, Armenia, a mountainous region, forest region. Whereas in Sound of Freedom, and Chris's operation she'll talk about, was really a trafficking ring of about 5 traffickers. Tell us what you remember about the head trafficker in Armenia, Martin, and sort of his organization, child pornography studio, child sex abuse material. I know that was a long time ago, but what do you remember about Martin?
Well, I remember when we very first started meeting him, the stuff that was just on his phone, and he was very excited about just showing us the stuff that was on his phone. And we were sitting in a restaurant, and I remember I'd come around his shoulder and look over his shoulder, and he would show me everything that you could possibly imagine on his phone, the children. And one of the things I noticed right off the bat was that he always had the same female with him. Yep. And I remember we were discussing that. Was there a possibility at some time was she even trafficked herself? And we were trying to determine that. And then I know that we found stuff later with him having connections to Florida and everything else. So
absolutely. And the woman you talked about that Martin had with her, she was in that moment a trafficker and exploiter, but she was one of his victims in the past. I don't know how good the cameras are on your bracelet, maybe to hold up that break the chain. That's what we talk about at Operation Underground Railroad, to break the chain from those victims who become the victimizers, who become the ones who hurt others. And that was a situation where we tried to break the chain. And the third of the Triple Take operations was led by Batman, our undercover operator Batman. And right now you can see videos about Batman. His character was played by Vampiro, the Bill Camp character in the movie. He led the third operation of Triple Take. So let's go now to some of our viewer questions. It's actually kind of cool to see how many have come in so far. So in no particular order, let me ask you. So Wiggins, you've seen the movie Sound of Freedom. How accurate was that operation and those operations in the movie? You can be honest of what parts you remember that are true and some that were maybe Hollywood embellishment.
Oh, I think that there are portions of that entire movie that are true. And a lot of them, especially a lot of the operations that we had gone on early on in o.u.r. I remember a lot of that stuff. You were mentioning earlier when we were sitting here talking about playing nurses and everything else, and which it depicts in that. All of us have been in those areas that are just terrible with the rivers. I've been on the Amazon River. I've been in a boat. I've been up it when it's raining. All of those things that you're seeing in there, a lot of the operations, and especially the heartbreaking stuff about the kids. I think that's the most difficult portion of the show to watch, because it's not just the operations, it's every time you would see one of those news clippings on that movie and see another kid, you're remembering those kids in all of those operations everywhere you go. And that was more real to me than anything was, not just the logistics of the operation, but seeing all those different faces.
Yeah, and the movie actually brought back PTSD for me. Even though I was with you in Armenia on October 11, 2014, I had been with our operators, meeting with Eduardo, meeting with Kelly Joanna, so essentially in the movie, Katy Juarez, and so seeing that was a little bit crazy. I feel that. Let's see. So let's go to this. Oh, Krista, this will be good for you. So when you saw Sound of Freedom a few days ago, you kind of saw the actual island rescue, but you lived this. So from what you remember, how long did that island operation take to plan? Again, from the weeks earlier, our CrossFit training, where I think I still have bruises that you put on me from our training, to actually getting on the island, setting everything up. I know you could speak for a long time on this, but just kind of what you remember of how long it took to plan that island operation.
Well, because it's Operation Triple Take, we had to be super conscious, and we wanted all 3 takedowns to happen at the exact same time. And they're in 3 different locations. So for everything to happen all at the same time so that the traffickers didn't tip one another off in the country, we had to have everything planned to a T. Funny you say, how long does the actual mission take? Right. Because that morning, we work with the local authorities when we're doing the takedown. One of the local authorities, the head, they actually missed their alarm that morning. Oh
my gosh, that's
so we're at the island, we're at Poop Island, and we are doing our best to keep all of the kids away from the actual traffickers. And so we have all the windows in this little hut closed, and it's hot. We're sweating, the kids are sweating, and we just keep looking out, like how much longer. Generally, the actual takedown itself is usually like an hour, 90 minutes, the actual takedown. The planning can take weeks prior, but that specific mission, because the person missed their alarm, the speedboats that had to come to the island to charge the island and take us all down, it took a few hours, and we had to get creative. So,
and what was interesting in the movie is all of the negotiation over building the sex hotel that you remember there, that actually took place, but it didn't take place in the movie when they said it did. It was on the island, as you remember, negotiating, because the Child Protective Services equivalent hadn't been there yet, hadn't arrived, and so that's what they were trying to do. Okay, let us see. The next one question here says, in Sound of Freedom, is the Timoteo necklace real? All right, I will take that quickly. So yes, it's real. It actually happened when Tim Ballard was an agent with Homeland Security. He rescued a young boy right in sort of that border region, actually, from Mexico into California. And this boy jumped into his arms and put this necklace around his neck. He didn't think much of it until that night he got home, and his son's playing with his necklace sitting on his lap and says, "Dad, this necklace has your name on it." And Tim said, "What are you talking about?" And he looked, and it was in Spanish, but it was a Bible verse from 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 11, talking about being a man of God, and it said Timoteo. So that then became the necklace in the movie. So absolutely real. All right, Wiggins, this next one, I think I'm going to turn it to you because you've actually gotten to work with this person. It says, is Vampiro a real person? So the Bill Camp character, Vampiro, as we know, tell us a little bit about what you know from our operator codenamed Batman, who very much is a real person and very closely mimicked what we saw in Vampiro's character in the movie.
Oh, it was uncanny how the similarities were just amazing with him, the actor, because the time that we spent with him in Colombia and seeing everything that he was able to do, and even the funny stuff, the serious stuff, hearing his life story, all of that, and hearing it in person was absolutely amazing. I thought that was one of the very best part of The Sound of Freedom, was that they had that character there and nailed that character so well.
Yeah, I mean, think about, right, being a drug user, a shaded past, laundering money for the Cali cartels. And to me, the most powerful scene in the movie, it's because it's true, is when the Bill Camp Vampiro character is talking to Jim Caviezel about his story, and that is Batman, and that was what mimicked that. I think if Hollywood would give this movie a fair shake, Bill Camp should get Best Supporting Actor. I mean, it was crazy. It's funny, and actually coming in real time here, the question is, well, that's all great about Vampiro and Batman, but what did you do to vet him before hiring him? Very good question. So he had already gone through his transformation. As he said, he had found the Lord. He had had a literal come to Jesus moment where he was hurt, felt that God was saying, you're not going to exploit these kids anymore. You're going to rescue them. So this Batman was actually, before even he started with Operation Underground Railroad, and Wiggins, you might remember this, he was working for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security as a confidential informant, a CI. Tim Ballard, his special agent, worked with him. So he was already vetted by the U.S. government. And again, his story is incredible. Again, o.u.r rescue.org to see some of the content on Batman. Also, our marketing team did an amazing job putting together something called Based on a True Story, except the parts that aren't. And I encourage everyone to go to o.u.r rescue to go all the way through. All right, Krista, this is one just came in. I think I'm going to go and ask you, because your experience too. I know it's a tough one, but please, how do you mentally prepare for an operation? So how would you answer that question, both from your working on the island operation and just what you've known now as a nurse, and again, even playing the role that you talked about a couple episodes ago to support our operations?
Yeah, I think mentally it's tough, right? Because you're the one that's there, you're the one that's actually face to face with traffickers. And when they come to the island, they hug you, they kiss you, and you just have to kind of have an out-of-body experience. You just kind of have to separate that and displace yourself somewhere else. And then when you're left alone with the kids, that's when your heart really opens and you get to see who these kids are and you get to feel their spirits and you get to just love on them as human beings. But the real trick is the mental effects after you leave the island and after you've helped these kids. So to prepare yourself, I've been on several missions, to prepare yourself for the next mission, you really just have to understand that it's for the greater good of children. Like you have to face these people head on and do these hard things so that in the end, something good can come of it.
Right. And actually, based on what you just said, and I saw one that came in here, I could pick any one of these questions. These are amazing. All right, first for you, Wiggins, but then for Krista. Along these lines, how do you restrain yourself from hurting or killing the traffickers when you're in the moment, sitting across the table from them, there in the party, when you see what they're doing, bringing these kids in? So Wiggins will go to you, and then to Krista on that, and I might even have a couple words too to add.
Well, that always seems to be the topic of conversation when you're talking to anyone about this subject, is how do you just not kill them before doing this? And I think mentally getting that in your head that this is our evidence process, I have to literally go, this is evidence for me. This is not something that I can act on or should I act on, but I have to go into that role of a former police officer where this is evidence for me. Yes, it does make you mad. Yes, you can be angry. No, you can't act on that. We're still trying to do what we can to put these people where they need to be incarcerated, right. and we're just screwing all that up if we're putting the handcuffs on them too hard, or if they're falling down on the way to the car.
Right.
That's not a good idea.
I know. I hear you.
Oh, for me, probably the fact that I know a lot of these other countries, the discipline that happens to these traffickers, like specifically in, I think it's Dominican Republic or Haiti, when they go to jail or prison there, they don't feed them. It's left for the family members to come and actually feed the prisoners there. So a lot of them starve to death.
Right.
And knowing that the punishment for them is going to come after, that's just what you have to have hope that in the end they get what they actually deserve.
No, I know. And so I was with the CIA for many years and with just some despicable human beings around the world. But my wife told me this is going to be the hardest thing that you've ever had to do, sit across from these traffickers. And of course I said, no, the agency taught us how to go into that special place in our mind. But the first time, and I was actually talking to Edward, so he, the real life criminal in your island operation, a few months before we were negotiating. He was sitting there talking about these young girls as if he was talking about a bag of tomatoes, a sack of limes. It weighs this much, it'll do this much, it costs this much, and it was everything I could to contain myself from coming across and strangling. But as you said, nope, this is what law enforcement needs. Nope, this is what we need to do to play out the role. And it's the most distasteful thing that I've ever done, but focusing on the chance to actually save kids on the other end. Thank you for being willing to share that. Okay, gosh, lots of questions coming in here. Let me see. Okay, here's one. Now this is a big one here. But what are some miracles that you've witnessed while on a rescue? I'll even give you a chance to think about this for a sec. First of all, the fact that we're here, Operation Underground Railroad, after almost 10 years now, where we've helped in the rescue of almost I think it's over now 7,000 individuals. We've assisted in the arrest of almost 7,000. The fact that Sound of Freedom's come to theaters over the past couple of weeks, that we've had more support, and we ask everyone, please, o.u.r.rescue.org to support us. So to me, I could go all down the line, the miracles we've seen helping to rescue and rehabilitate God's precious children. But Krista, let me go to you first and then to Wiggins. Only share what you feel comfortable sharing, because I know, and I don't want to get emotional too, but this happens a lot when we do this with o.u.r. in terms of these miracles.
Yeah. I think I could probably address every single mission, but I could honestly say that every mission, there is a miracle that happens with every single mission that we're on. Specifically, I remember one Haitian mission, and we were just kind of talking about this, like, sometimes they get a little dangerous and you can be at death's door, but specifically before we actually start a rescue mission, like, we invite a prayer or we invite the assistance of God to inspire us and allow our minds to be clear and to have things happen that we can rescue these kids. And I remember every single time, if a roadblock comes up, a road is closed, the vehicle we've chosen can't traverse the mountain,
right,
something else comes into play, and we're always able to actually complete the rescue mission.
Yes.
It's crazy.
That's a great one. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
I think that probably the greatest miracle I've seen at o.u.r. is the fact that when I first heard about it and had the opportunity to be a part of it, I thought that's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. I literally thought that was the craziest thing I've ever heard. In fact, everybody around me said the same thing. And it would have never happened without the people supporting us, without the great people that we have here. And that's been the greatest miracle that I've seen here. Saving the kids and everything else, absolutely wonderful. But being able to see the miracle of this corporation growing like it has, to continue to do that and do it on a grander scale, greatest thing ever.
Well said. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to start combining questions. So two of them kind of came in. So Wiggins, I'm going to start with you here. It says, have you done any operations in the U.S. or are they all international? So start with that, because you were 20 plus years, I think, with U.S. law enforcement. So yes, you talk about that. And then, do you need therapy after what you see on these operations? I can only imagine what you saw as a cop so talk about that briefly, o.u.r. and then therapy. And then if you would mind, Krista, then rolling into that second question about therapy after the operations. Is that something we get asked all the time? Because our women and men are in the deepest, darkest, places of hell when they're face to face with some of these traffickers.
Yeah, international, done a lot of operations internationally. As far as child trafficking investigations here in the U.S., even as a police officer, I never investigated human trafficking or child trafficking in that regard. As far as sex offenses go here in the U.S., yes, multiple cases on that, and been on multiple missions internationally. As far as therapy goes, I don't think that there's anyone that's been a part of one of these missions that probably doesn't need a little bit of therapy. Correct. I know the very first time that I went, and I had been a police officer for years and years and years, and been in a homicide unit and worked streets and worked street crimes and been in sex offenses, and it was still extremely emotional to me. Even the Sound of Freedom was really hard for me, a lot of parts of it.
I can imagine.
The nice thing is I have a sister that's a therapist. I have that afforded to me, so that if I ever need that help, yes, I've had to go after that multiple times, and it has been extremely beneficial. Or you got to find something to curb that.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing, for sure. Krista, I'm sure you have perspective on this as well.
Yeah, I think for me, when I first get home from rescue missions, it's always, I have young children. So especially for triple take, I had 2 young boys at the time. When we got home, the first thing I do is just love on my babies, because I know that, some of these kids don't have parents to love on them. And secondly, therapy, absolutely. I think that there's a reason that therapists exist, and I love my therapist, and I think that mentally there's no better thing to do than to invest in making sure you have a sound mind before going to the next mission.
Yeah. And for me, it's even in the most successful rescue operations, there are always those you couldn't get, and so struggling with that. And then coming home, and as you said, hugging, I have 2 daughters. They're college age now, but when I started doing this, you can imagine early teens. And the hardest thing was seeing the hell that I'd see and true horror with these kids overseas. Then coming home, and my daughters would be like, Dad, today was the worst day of my life. Oh, sweetie, what's the matter? My iPhone screen got a crack in it. right? And to square that up and to be like, oh my goodness, if I failed as a parent. And so we do have therapists who help our operators, and that was a great question. I think we don't have time for maybe one or two questions, so here's one. Is it true that a lot of child trafficking is being done by parents or family members or friends? Have you encountered situations where relatives sell their kids into slavery? So I'll take that. In the United States, the vast majority of trafficking victims come from broken homes, latchkey kids, kids who don't get the love they need at home. And so they go, as the country western song says, they go looking for love in all the wrong places. They go, who's going to fill their needs? Do you need food, clothing, shelter? Do you just need to be told that you're beautiful? You could be a model, that you'd be loved. So yes, we see that oftentimes. Overseas it happens as well, but it's more of the socioeconomic conditions where you have maybe a single mother with a lot of kids. You remember the triple take operation. You had Kelly Joanna Suarez, who was named Katy Juarez in the movie. They were preying on kids who just needed money, right? And parents. And we saw that. And remember, Martine was doing the same thing in Armenia. So we definitely see that. But again, maybe to wrap up with one final question is to ask you, how can we get more of these operations to take place in the U.S.? So Wiggins, maybe I'll ask you that. Obviously, we work just behind the scenes. We don't do the actual operations. We provide funding, training, tools, technology. But for those who want to invest in the U.S., what would you say what we could do?
Well, I think we're doing that a lot with our law enforcement group that we do have, being able to expand that with the canines that we're helping with and a lot of the equipment that we're buying for police departments and things like that. If people are a part of law enforcement groups and they do need assistance, that's one of the greatest ways that we can share a lot of our o.u.r. stuff, is being able to get in touch of our law enforcement group and be able to help them obtain a lot of the equipment that they need.
Perfect. All right, Krista, we'll give you the last question here. Someone writes here, anything about Triple Take? What can you tell us about Operation Triple Take, the movie? Maybe just real quick, one last thing, your thought that you'd want everyone to know about Operation Triple Take, which became Sound of Freedom.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the largest mission that I got to be a part of, and to actually sit on the boat with the children and just on the way there, the singing, the laughter, the things these kids are doing, like actually being able to save 2 boatfuls of children, boys, girls, virgins, non-virgins, kids with parents, kids without parents, kids who had been sold into slavery, kids whose parents had sent them on the boat, and kids who just needed money to skip school and come to the island. Being able to actually rescue physically 2 full boatfuls of children was probably one of the best rewards to see the number of kids on that mission that we could take care of.
Krista, thank you. Wiggins, thank you. I joined Operation Underground Railroad in August of 2014. You both were already here working. Thank you for that. Absolutely a pleasure. It's a bittersweet moment here as we wrap today's stream in our series, Rise Up for Freedom. Have absolutely loved being in studio these past many days for these episodes. We appreciate your willingness to rise up and speak out against sex trafficking. We know it's a difficult subject to address, and the only way we end it is to begin and continue to talk about it. If you've seen the movie Sound of Freedom, or if you plan to see it, remember that o.u.r. does not receive any financial support from the movie, no proceeds from ticket sales, but you can still get in the fight by making a generous donation. Please give what you can to our men and women who are leading operations in the United States and around the world. Go to o.u.r.rescue.org for more information. And one last thing, today is World Day Against Human Trafficking. This would be a great time for you to make a personal commitment to get involved. Maybe your involvement is simply as a parent who takes a greater interest in the apps your child's using. That's so important to keeping them safe. Maybe you go to Facebook today and start a fundraiser to help Operation Underground Railroad. Maybe you go to church, your workplace, or community group and start an awareness program. Whatever you choose to do, make today be the day you start. We must join together and rise up for freedom. We need to speak up and get people addressing this most important issue in our society today. If you'd like more information, again, go to our website, o.u.r.rescue.org. Thanks for watching.